In the Middle East, rebel forces are now just outside of Syria's third largest city, the last government stronghold on the road to the capital, Damascus. Margaret Evans brings us up to date on the lightning offensive.
The legacy of Syria's al-Assad dynasty being dragged through the streets of Hama. The head, all that's left of a statue of former President Hafez al-Assad, whose son Bashar now faces a renewed insurgency spreading across the land. From Hama, the rebel groups who last week captured Aleppo are on the march south towards Homs, the next city on the road to Damascus. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has wished them well, saying the Syrian president had rejected a conversation with him.
Idlib, Hama.
I would say we hope for this advance to continue without any issues, he said, although he cautioned against terrorist elements in their midst. Turkey is home to 4 million Syrian refugees displaced during the long civil war, and a stable Aleppo could allow many to return. That's where the main rebel leader has been making himself known. Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani is an Islamist with ties to al-Qaeda in the past, trying to moderate his image, pledging to rebuild Syria.
Displaced individuals scattered across the world, those drowning in the seas and those living in tents on the borders of other countries. What kind of victory are we talking about?
Russian warplanes bombed a bridge between Hama and Homs in support of Damascus, but many analysts are still waiting to see what kind of fight back the Syrian regime might be capable of bringing.
The level of dysfunction in the Syrian regime forces is astounding.
Heiko Wimmen is with the International Crisis Group in neighboring Lebanon.
If they manage to take Homs, then I think many things that nobody thought possible could become possible.
That would cut Damascus off from the Syrian coastline, al-Assad's Alawite minority stronghold. And there are other key developments. Syrian Kurds taking control of a government city in the eastern desert, and in the south, rebels claiming to control one of the border crossings with Jordan. That frontier reportedly now closed. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Beirut.
For more on this situation in Syria, we've reached Joshua Landis, the director for the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. Joshua Landis, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Pleasure.
The rebels are moving fast. There's a report from Reuters that rebels have taken the southern city of Dara under a deal with the army to secure the army's orderly withdrawal. What does it say about Bashar al-Assad's ability to hold on if his army is negotiating the handover of towns to rebels?
Well, it looks really bad. The Syrian army doesn't have much fight left in it, and it has been melting away in front of these cities. Aleppo, Hama, Homs now is the big battlefront, and that is the key city. As your journalist said, the main highway from Damascus to Tartus, the coastal cities, which is the stronghold of the Alawites, runs right south of Homs. Whoever owns Homs is going to be able to cut that off. And if the rebels take Homs, they'll cut Damascus off. And Damascus is an overwhelmingly Sunni city, as are the various villages around it. And it won't be long before that would fall if Homs is taken. We have to see if there's any fight left in the Syrian army, and that the Battle of Homs will show that.
You know, these rebel forces, they've moved at lightning pace. Like this is their territory they've taken, the areas they've taken, but you have this Islamist rebel group with ties to al-Qaeda trying to take out a dictator with ties to Russia and other bad actors. I mean, who are these rebels that are potentially forcing out the Syrian dictator?
Well, there's many militias, but the major militia is Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which is led by Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani. And as your commentator said, Jawlani worked for both ISIS and al-Qaeda, was sent by Caliph Baghdadi to open a chapter of al-Qaeda in Syria. And he did that with extraordinary success. He has remade himself in the last number of years into a non-jihadi. claiming to be a nationalist now. He's given up and suppressed those elements within al-Nusra who were hoping to fight Europeans and Americans and be an internationalist. And so he's really remade himself and has set up a really professional, not only professional military, but a professional media outfit that has reassured Christians that they are not going to chop heads or take it or attack them, and has been reaching out to all sorts of Syrians saying, we're going to take over the country, don't fight us, we will treat you well. The big question mark is how he will treat the Alawites, and they have been fleeing in front of his forces to the coastland. And that will be the big battle, is taking the coastal areas where most of the Alawites live. And they're 12% of the Syrian population.
Is this conversion from ISIS and al-Qaeda to a Syrian nationalist, is there evidence that that is sincere and real? Do you know? Because looking at it from a Western point of view, when you see ISIS and al-Qaeda in the history, you get anxious. How should we view this?
Well, there are many Syrians who are anxious as well, and we just don't know. You know, the Taliban, when they retook the capital, Karbala, the capital of Afghanistan, they promised that they would treat women well, that they had learned a lot and changed. Right. And of course, they forbid women after 6th grade from going to school. So we don't, and this group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, looks at the Taliban as a model in many ways. So it's unclear how much their spots have changed, but they are in a big coalition of other Syrians. And as they conquer these major cities, there are a lot of secular Syrians, there are a lot of Christians, there's a lot of Alawites, Ismailis, other minorities. And Syria is 10% Kurdish as well. So they're not going to want to be led by a Taliban light or heavily Islamist governments. But we've seen video that not controlled by the government or by the new rebels come out of them toppling Christmas trees, smashing up liquor stores, and doing other things that Islamists do. So it's unclear what the long-term effects of this will be on the Syrian people.
So it's a massive coalition of different militias coming together with a common goal of taking out the al-Assad regime. He has been an ally of Vladimir Putin and relied on Russia in the past. Russia's military assets are very heavily occupied right now in Ukraine. So if Russia can't come to his aid, I mean, what do we know about the Assad regime's ability to hold on, to defend itself here?
Well, you're absolutely right. And Israel has just destroyed Hezbollah largely, and as well as attacked Iran, and it's been pounding the Syrian army for a year. At least 3 times a week, it's been bombing military manufacturing sites, important parts of the military. It's killed most of the top Iranians in Syria in a number of operations. So it has really weakened the Syrian army, and there isn't a lot of fight left in it. The Syrian people are fed up with this regime by and large, and many were hoping for a peace dividend when the war sort of petered out in 2000. It never came. There are heavy American sanctions on this. America owns all the oil and gas, so that's not coming to the Syrian government. And so Assad has not been able to rebuild. He hasn't been able to bring back electricity, many of the schools, repair. So it's a bleak future with Assad, and people don't want to fight and die for this government. We'll have to see what the new one brings and whether America will lift those sanctions, return oil and gas to the Damascus, or keep it for the Kurds. These are going to be big questions, and the government, if the rebels win, they're going to look to the international community to lift those sanctions and to renew relations and help Syria rebuild.
Okay, I literally have 60 seconds left, so maybe it's unfair for me to ask you this question. But we see President Erdogan, a NATO ally in Turkey, cheering on the rebels. How do you expect the West to respond to this? Because there is a lot of uncertainty and difficulty on either side of it.
Well, I think they'll give them some grace period, but there'll be tremendous pressure to lift the sanctions and to let them rebuild, and to lift this terrorist designation. And Jolani has just jettisoned today he has changed his name back to his childhood name. He's given up this nom de guerre, Jolani, because it sounds al-Qaeda-y. It sounds jihadi.
Yes.
So he's changing his name. He's doing everything he can. And there are going to be a lot of countries that are going to try to help him get back in the good graces of the West.
Fascinating stuff on a fast-moving story. Joshua Landis, the director for the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. It's good to meet you, sir. Thank you for being here today.
Pleasure being with you, David.